Sarov, Russia, August 22, 2025. At the heart of the country's nuclear research center, President Vladimir Putin struck an optimistic tone about relations with Washington. Fresh from his recent meeting with US President Donald Trump in Alaska, Putin said he hopes the pace of joint work between the two countries will be maintained. He emphasized that the first steps already taken could mark the beginning of a full-scale restoration of ties. The Russian leader went further, praising Trump's leadership qualities as a guarantee that relations will improve, even as he acknowledged that Moscow-Washington ties had fallen to their lowest point since the Second World War. Putin also revealed that Russia and the United States are discussing possible cooperation in mineral extraction, not only in Russia's Arctic zone, but in Alaska itself. He noted that American partners are interested in the technologies Russia already possesses, particularly in the field of Arctic resource development. Linking economics to security, Putin reminded his audience that Russia's nuclear submarines routinely patrol under the ice of the Arctic Ocean, disappearing from radar. A strategic advantage, he said, underscores the importance of the region. From honoring Soviet scientists to signaling cautious hope for better relations with Washington, Putin's visit to Sarov carried a dual message: respect for Russia's nuclear legacy and an eye on the potential for cooperation with the United States. Russian President Vladimir Putin used a visit to the historic nuclear research hub of Sarov to send a carefully balanced message, one of both national pride and cautious optimism about relations with the United States. The trip came just a week after his meeting with US President Donald Trump in Alaska, a summit that, while modest in its achievements, has raised speculation that Moscow and Washington may be inching toward a new chapter in their often troubled ties. Speaking to nuclear industry personnel, Putin expressed hope that the progress begun in Alaska would not be fleeting. He said, "I very much hope that the first steps that have been taken are the beginning of a full-scale restoration of our relations." He coupled this with praise for Trump personally, declaring that the American leader's qualities were, in his words, a good guarantee that relations will be restoring. The remarks were notable because Putin did not shy away from acknowledging the deep freeze between the two powers. He openly admitted that relations with Washington are, by his own measure, at their lowest point since the aftermath of World War II. But he quickly contrasted that bleak assessment with a glimmer of hope, telling the audience that with Trump in office, some light at the end of the tunnel has finally appeared. Beyond the diplomatic rhetoric, Putin also hinted at concrete avenues of cooperation. He disclosed that Russian and American officials are now actively discussing joint ventures in mineral extraction, not only in Russia's own Arctic zone, but even in Alaska. That statement drew attention as the Arctic is rapidly becoming a geopolitical hotspot. Putin emphasized that Russia holds unique technologies for operating in the harsh polar environment and suggested that US partners are increasingly interested in accessing those capabilities. The economic theme was reinforced when Putin spoke about Novatek, Russia's major liquefied natural gas company, which is already developing Arctic resources. He stressed that the region holds huge reserves of mineral resources and described ongoing work as an example of Russia's commitment to unlocking that potential. Yet Putin also intertwined economic cooperation with national security, reminding his listeners of Russia's enduring military edge in the Arctic. He spoke openly about the country's nuclear submarines that patrol beneath the ice, disappearing from radar and giving Moscow, as he put it, a military advantage. By sharing this detail, Putin underscored a dual message: that Russia is open to working with the United States on development, but remains firmly protective of its strategic dominance. The setting of his remarks also mattered. Sarov is steeped in symbolism, home to the scientists who once built the Soviet atomic bomb. Putin paid tribute to that legacy by awarding the director of the Russian Federal Nuclear Center and by laying flowers at the monument of Yuri Khariton, one of the original creators of the Soviet bomb. The imagery linked the pride of past achievements to the promise of future cooperation. Throughout the visit, Putin was seen engaging with top officials, from the head of Rosatom, Russia's nuclear energy agency, to the leadership of Roscosmos, the country's space program. He also met with the governor of the Nizhny Novgorod region, reinforcing the domestic dimension of his tour, a show of support for Russia's regions most closely tied to the nuclear and defense sectors. Taken together, the day's events created a layered narrative, On the one hand, Putin presented himself as the guardian of Russia's nuclear legacy, honouring scientists and highlighting military capabilities. On the other, he positioned himself as a pragmatic statesman, ready to seize opportunities for cooperation with the United States if political conditions allow. The broader context, of course, is a world watching carefully. US-Russia relations remain strained over Ukraine, NATO expansion, cyber conflicts and sanctions. Yet in Sarov, Putin chose to highlight areas of potential partnership, energy, Arctic exploration and economic collaboration, while still reminding audiences that Russia's defence readiness remains unmatched in the polar latitudes. For both domestic and international audiences, the message was clear. Russia will not retreat from its strategic posture, but it is open to pragmatic dialogue with Washington. And for Putin personally, the willingness to publicly commend Trump suggests a calculation that the American president could be a useful partner in easing tensions that have reached historic lows. From the solemn act of laying flowers at a monument to the confident remarks about submarines under Arctic ice, Putin's Sarov visit underscored both continuity and change. Continuity in Russia's determination to remain a global power, and change in the tentative signals that a thaw with Washington may yet be possible.